All right, we are live. We don't have any viewers yet, but we're live. We are live. Let's see. I need to change this over. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. How are we doing tonight?
Good.
Great.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So if you are with us tonight, we are doing our first of CDEA's diversity dialogues, and we're really excited to be here. My name is Nicole Robinson, and I am one of the moderators for today. And so hopefully, if you're joining us, you are going to have an evening that is full of life and amazing conversation with some really cool and awesome people. And so we are going to go ahead and get started with some introductions so you know who we're dealing with tonight. So Allison, since you're closest one on my screen, why don't you go ahead and get started?
Okay, my name is Allison Frenzel, and I teach public high school in Sonoma County, California. I'm the program coordinator for an interdisciplinary performing arts program. I've been teaching English for 13 years, and I started a dance program about 6 years ago at the high school, and I've also taught at our local dance studio, the Movement Lab.
Thank you, Allison. Ricka, you want to go next?
Oh, yes, I am Ricka Kelsch, and I have taught between K and college for over 30 years. And I started a nonprofit organization called Dance and Dialogue. And we are going into our 5th season and serving up to about 1,000 students in the LA area this year.
Thank you. Thank you, Ricka. Let's go with LaTanya.
Hi, I'm LaTanya D. Tigner, and I work with Dimensions Dance Theater in Oakland, California. I also teach dance at UC Berkeley and Contra Costa College.
Awesome. Thank you. And Patricia, do we have volume for you yet? Patricia's our diversity director. No, it looks like she still doesn't have any volume. Well, Patricia is our diversity director for the California Dance Education Association, and she's lovely. I wish you all could hear her voice, but we'll see if we can get her technical difficulties taken care of. My name is Nicole Robinson. I am the president-elect for the CDEA, and I teach at a high school in Fontana, which is about 50 miles east of Los Angeles, working class community and 90% Latino, and I'm the dance program director there. All right, so audience, couple of things for you guys to know tonight. You should have a chat box or a comments box, and that comment box is live. So if you have any questions or you want to add to the conversation, please feel free to comment as we broadcast. And if you are in California, CDEA is your statewide professional organization for dance. So we encourage you to join CDEA as a way to connect with dance educators statewide and also to be kept abreast of current dance policies in California. So if you are so inclined, and we'd love it if you joined us and joined our club, joined our squad, go to cdeadance.org for more information or to join. So thank you for being here with us, and let's go ahead, I think, and get started with the conversation. So when we talk about diversity in dance, what do you guys hear when you hear that? When we talk about diversity in dance, what do you hear? What does that mean to you?
The first thing that comes to mind, this is LaTanya, and the first thing I think of initially is the genres, the different forms, and how multiple forms can be brought into the education of students. And then what also comes is how to diversify the students who have access to those forms and how to best reach them, for lack of a better phrase, where they're at. But I think along with that, and meeting them where they're at, you have to understand where they're coming from, so that you can go into their spaces with respect and knowledge of their background. So.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to chime in on that?
I think it was interesting how Latanya started her discussion with talking about the diversity in genres, because as I was reflecting on some of the conversation topics from tonight, I realized that there's some of these topics and questions are really different depending on through which lens you look. Mm-hmm. And so, so that was an interesting starting point. And a big thing that I am passionate about is this idea of equity of access. And so when I think of diversity in dance, I think of how can we give every student an opportunity to explore this transformative art form and grow as a person, which is what my experience with dance is. And how can we make it available to every student, regardless of ability level or disability, regardless of race or ethnic background, regardless of home life or limitations or risk factors. So that's basically my first thought on that question.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
And I think, I mean, I just wanted to piggyback on what's already been said, because I think it's been said by both Latanya and Allison so beautifully. But also, when I think about diversity in dance, I think there comes that, I don't know if it's a stigma, but it's the thought of, you know, putting people in their little boxes. So who can execute that certain genre? You know, should certain, you know, we say, oh, only certain people of certain neighborhoods might crump, whereas another neighborhood, well, they're going to be more contemporary dancers. We're putting people in boxes. So who does do these dances, and why do they do I think that was, you know, Latanya was speaking a little bit about that as well. And yeah, so who would be executing and performing these? Is there an expectation from the audience, from people, from others, or from the dancers themselves, even trying to figure out what their area would be of focus in terms of, you know, finding their special niche?
Thank you. Thank you. So our conversation today is definitely about all of those things, but our focus today is about dancers of color. And so kind of looking at dance through that lens. And maybe I think just to start, what do we see as the biggest challenge in that diversification of dance in terms of access to dancers of color? Just as, you know, we get that, you know, I love that, you know, when we get to the stage, people go, where are all the dancers of color? And I, you know, have a very like knee-jerk response to that. So maybe let's talk about those challenges in terms of the diversification, if that's a word, of dance as a whole. What are we thinking about that, or what are our thoughts about that?
Can you guys hear me yet?
Yes.
Yes. Jesus, dear rock.
I took off the headphones. I lost the headphones.
Okay.
In terms of that question, yeah, I was thinking about, you know, another question sort of follows up with it is like, how do you get, I feel like, buy-in, like getting students of, you know, different ethnicities to really want to explore and kind of go down that sort of path and journey. And so how do you kind of get that sort of buy-in from the students? And I was wondering if that would maybe help to kind of steer this conversation. I don't know if anybody has any ideas about that.
I actually have questions about that more than ideas, because with the organization that I have, I bring teens together from all over a city, right? All over the city. And when I reach out to these, to various neighborhoods where they are severely underserved neighborhoods, I find that I don't know what is happening. I don't know if it's apathy. I don't know if they have so many other programs that going on that they just are too busy. I'm not sure what is happening. But when I say I have this opportunity and it's free and everyone gets to hear each other's stories, whatever, I'm finding that it is more challenging to bring in those neighborhoods and to get them, you know, enroll them, enlist them in this, you know, program, which is free for everyone, than other neighborhoods. And so I love what you were saying, and I would love to find answers to that, you know, find a solution to that, find a way to reach them and let them know how important what they have to offer, you know, is to the rest of the population in Los Angeles. We need to hear from them.
I want to piggyback on that a little bit, because it is a conversation Nicole and I had briefly earlier, regarding this idea of communities and each community having its own unique set of experiences. And it's hard to, one is so different than another, right? Each community is like its own organism, and without lived experience within that community, we'll never really fully understand everything that goes on within that community. And I mean, obviously the issue is so much bigger than dance, right? I mean, we live in a pretty racist culture. And opportunities for people of color are limited across discipline, across career, across just about everything in this society, due to these unconscious bias that exist within choreographers or within potential employers or within the hiring manager. And that's so deep rooted, and it's such a harder issue to address. So what I see happens in the dance is traditionally, in my opinion, something that is available to people of privilege. If you can afford it, if you don't have to go home and take care of your siblings, or if you don't have to work after school, or if you have transportation, you can go to dance class. But if you have these life things that take up your outside of public school time, how are you going to access that? And I think so the question really becomes like looking at the whole student instead of just looking at it as a problem with the community. It's more of like, what is going on in these students' lives that prevent them from doing things that have traditionally been extracurricular. And so, I mean, I talked to Nicole about this. I firmly believe that this should be something, dance specifically, should be something offered to every public school student. That's how they'll get access, right? If we do it during the time allotted for education.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to go on a tangent, but
No,
I did earlier. Yeah. I'm sorry.
And I think then that's a very valuable conversation. I mean, let's talk about access then, because I feel like that is I think that that's a huge problem. And I think that that ties into also how much dance costs and the cost of dance and how much does dance really cost. So, I mean, let's have that dialogue about the access challenges. What do you see? Obviously, what are the challenges in terms of access, in terms of a dancer of color participating in dance? If that makes sense.
Yes, it does make sense. We are Dimensions Dance Theater has an after-school program where students of color and students, other students who want to participate in dance can do that. And we take our program into the schools by the request of the teachers and the students, so that there's already a buy-in from the students. I just had a conversation with a principal yesterday whose students asked for a dance program, and she brought in a teacher, and it was this was a school in a predominantly Black neighborhood, and the teacher that went in was a young white woman right out of college, and she couldn't connect to the students, and there was some pushback. You know, they're middle schoolers, so they do that. You know, there's that pushback. But she couldn't get over the hump of getting them for the buy-in, even though that's what they asked for. So that, you know, and a little bit of, I think, and she came in wanting to teach contemporary and ballet. So that was a pushback. And then she shifted and started to allow them, you know, give them what they wanted first, but she couldn't get past that. Okay, I'm giving you what you want. Now I'm going to offer you something else along with that. So, and that's what we figured that out a long time ago. Like, they said they want dance, but they want a specific type.
Yeah.
And then, so we give them that, but we make sure that they understand that this goes with this and this and this, the connected. Here I am with the connectedness again, with the connections between the forms.
Yeah.
And, but again, we meet them where they're at, but we have to understand where they're coming from. And then to take that, I'm going to loop back, and then I'm going to be quiet to once we get into the college, the college level. We have a lot of students of color who want to start there because they didn't have the access in earlier education. So they're already behind the 8 ball. They're already starting at a disadvantage. And then they don't see in those classrooms reflections of themselves in the lectures about who is dancing, who's creating work. so it kind of stifles them and it shuts them down and out. And we just had that experience at Berkeley that we're trying to work through right now, so that they see their reflection and who's, so that they can go on and be on the stage.
Yes.
Yes.
Other thoughts about that in terms of access, or what we see are, and that can even range to when we're talking about just practices within dance that affect access as well. Like what do we see that we know obviously it's not being delivered in areas where students of color are, but maybe even combating the why of that.
Spending 22 years working with middle school students in particular, and then also with high school students, I've often said that my class is 90% psychology and 10% movement. And so when we're talking about accessing our students, it really is, Latanya, you're so right. It's really about finding out who they are and what their story is. And giving them not just, we're giving them technique, we're giving them dance styles, and teaching them how to perform. And at the same time, we want to let them know that they matter and that we see them and we hear them, and giving them that voice. I love how you turned it back to them and said, okay, and now with that comes the responsibility of learning what dance really is and where you connect to it. And I find that even for my students who are not going to become professionals, that and this circles back around to, especially students of color who are not living in privileged neighborhoods, is that it provides an outlet for them. So even if they're not going to be professionals, this is a go-to thing. They can just get it out. They can, don't we all just love to just dance things out? Just dance it out. Feels good.
Absolutely. Yep. Absolutely.
One of the, just quickly, one of the ways I've gotten buy-in before a first day class, I teach in a public high school as well, where, I've got a pretty diverse group, but kids join my class and they think it's a hip hop class. The right first day, they were like, oh, cool, I'm going to take dance instead of PE, which they can't really do anyways. Unfortunately, should be able to, and then they think, and I just tell them, I'm like, I bring in people from all different genres. I bring in experts. I bring in cool guys who can teach what things I don't teach well. I tell them that cool stays out the door. Like, you come in, this is an ego-free, judgment-free zone. And I have them start with some really goofy improv type games that make them really uncomfortable, but also really comfortable with each other. And I feel like that initial exposure to kids, it kind of loosens them up. This isn't a place where you come in here and you bring your high school, I'm the cool guy. Leave it. And it seems to work. And I think bringing in male teachers has really helped to do workshops. And I'm fortunate enough to have some funding that allows me to pay people, which I'm really thankful for, some state funding. So I think as much exposure to as many different teachers from as many different backgrounds and as many different genres as possible is one of the most important pieces of my job as a dance educator.
Yes, I agree.
Just our other panelists just came on in Hawaii. Yeah, aloha, aloha.
Yay!
Hi. So Amy, do you want to take a couple of minutes just to introduce yourself, and then we'll continue back in the conversation. Glad to see you.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Amy Schaffner, and as Nicole said, I'm a dance professor at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and I am delighted to be with all of you, so thank you so much for including me.
Thank you. Thank you. So we this is already going. I'm excited about where this conversation is going already. What I loved hearing about just now was talking about ways to engage dancers. And I think I heard from just about all of you, dancers sometimes coming in with a set idea of what dance is, and then the way to, and some of you talked about the ways to connect them. And what do we think the importance of that, or why should I, I'm a classically trained dancer. You want dance. Latanya, you talked about the educator that came in. You want dance. So I'm here to teach you dance, and it should matter what it looks like. So why can we not, as dance educators, take that attitude? Or also even further, I refer to them as the big three: jazz, ballet, and modern. Why should we be a little bit more open to other dance forms, especially when we're going into communities that are maybe vastly different from the ones that we have grown up in? Like, what's the value of that? Because a lot of times those of us that are classically trained, we're very reluctant. We're reluctant to teach hip hop we're reluctant to teach ballet to hip hop music. So what's the value of that, I guess, when we're thinking about dancers of color? What's the importance of culture, I guess?
Mm-hmm. For me personally, the importance of that is for the kids that we work with. They already have a notion or an understanding that hasn't been spoken, that type of form is not accessible, is not for them. They don't do that. That's not what we do, and so that's for, other people. And to go in and break down just the rudimentary fundamentals of dance and the basics that, and show them across forms. This is how this looks in this form. We all have access to the same information. It just comes out differently. And how you present, say, a pas de bourrée in your form in hip hop or house is as valid as how it's presented in modern or ballet. So, and making sure that what they hold in their body is valid. So I'm going to expose you to this information. And it just, for our students, they become more culturally responsible and respectful of others once they see that this is a bridge between cultures. It's not something to compartmentalize people. It's more connecting than it is making you do this and you do this, so you cannot possibly do this. It's like, no, you can do. Your body is accessible to all that information, and how you're coming into the space is valid. And I think sometimes it could feel elitist when people come in and say, no, this is what I'm going to teach you. We don't have time for that. This is what I've been, and not given the ownership of the space, so to speak. And that can shut people down I feel like no matter where they're coming from, but particularly people of color who traditionally have not had access.
Yeah.
And I think, as a dancer, as a choreographer, we, our form has grown and evolved over the years. There was only ballet, then we had modern, then jazz, all these forms evolved over the years, tap. And so people who are doing hip hop moves have no idea, unless they take African, that some of the moves have been borrowed and brought into a modern way of doing them. And if we're talking to our future about expanding their minds and expanding their horizons, we as educators have to be willing to try other things on that we might not be comfortable with and see what that looks like. and let these kids have that opportunity to try those things on. That's why I love the idea of improv games and all that, because they're finding out for some of them for the first time that their bodies actually can move, because they have this mindset, and some of them because their parents have told them they can't dance. So now we're just trying to let them move and then see what that looks like. And if they try a pas de bourrée in a funny way, you know, fantastic. Fantastic. So we celebrate that. And then we say, okay, that's great. And this is where it came from. And then we can show them the origins. We can take them to the beginning and show them the tradition, but also celebrate and see who knows what the next dance special movement is going to be. It's going to come from, it's going to evolve from whatever is happening right now.
Right.
Oh, go ahead. Is it Amy?
Oh, Amy, go ahead.
Or Patricia?
Me?
It looked like you were about to say something, so we were waiting. Like, oh,
okay. I'll say something really quick. I'll just add to that for me, I think one of the things that distinguishes something from, you know, maybe professional training to be a performer to making an actual dance education. The thing that distinguishes us when we're sort of in a formal school setting providing dance education is that it is sort of a commitment to assuring that students have that broader knowledge about the whole scope of dance and all the genres that fall within it. I think if we hold ourselves to the same sort of accountability, or we seek that same legitimacy from other field areas like English or math or science, you know, a student's journey is not just in a singular way in their writing class or in their math class, right? There's an expectation that they become sort of literate in that subject area. And I think that when we think about what does literacy in a broad sense mean in dance, it cannot just be, you know, ballet, modern, and jazz, right? There's such a missing thing. And I can certainly say that speaking from the point of a university, our incoming freshmen often struggle when they might be just so technically virtuosic and amazing sort of performers, but they're so limited in their understanding of what dance is that they can struggle sometimes in that freshman year when all of a sudden they're sort of being expected to understand this broader sense of dance, and they don't have that broader perspective. So I think one of the responsibilities we have as dance educators at all levels is to make sure that the students do understand that dance exists all around the world and across all cultures.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we're talking about, I love that you brought up dance literacy and about the idea that in order for a dancer to be literate, they need to have a wide range of experiences. But as a professional artist sometimes, or even as we're trying to break the glass ceiling to be able to do that, it comes back to those three dance forms. And a lot of times in higher ed, it's ballet and modern. So I'm wondering about, and maybe this panel can discuss this further, then how does that change? So I may have had a student who's had this experience, you know, take my students, they come in at 14, they start dancing, they love it, they want to continue doing it. And then all of a sudden it's time to apply to a university and they're going to major in dance because their parents are like, well, you can do this dance thing, but you better go to college, which is very common for working class families. And all of a sudden that ceiling smacks them right on the top of the head because I've done my best to make them literate. They can write, they can talk about dance, but you know, we're just going to look at you, and we're going to, at that audition, we're going to look at two areas, ballet and modern, and that's it. And we don't even talk to students. And so how do we think that then maybe affects this lack of diversity in dance, or do we even think that's a factor?
Yeah. I mean, I think it also comes into the teachers, right? I think it has to do, can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
yes.
You're fine. You're doing great.
I think it has to do with the teachers. Because I think a lot of this, what happens is you don't have enough, maybe you don't have enough support, maybe you don't have enough to go forward, because the choices do seem to slim down. They seem to slim down as you get older. And I'm wondering, it's sort of like access for the students, and there's also some sort of accessibility and support that the teachers need to continue. And I wonder, I feel like it's just the sort of the same thing that's happening. And it makes me also kind of think about, like, what are the supports for the teachers out there that want to maybe come and teach, you know, in a university, and they have West African, or they want to do hip hop, or that's not very common. That's not very common. You have to get your master, you have to get teaching artists to come in, you know, who have those experiences a lot of the time. So, I don't know.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is we talked about this idea that there's an access issue. So we know that there's an access problem, which therein means that a dancer is going to start late, right? So the dancer it doesn't have the access, so they're going to start late. For some kids, it's high school. And so then they get where they are proficient, and then it's time to go to college. And for a lot of my students, that's where it stops.
Yeah.
It ends right there. It ends right there because they, and, you know, fortunately, I think the thing that's been great about a lot of colleges are changing their practices. But I guess I'm just trying to bring this all back around to dance literacy. We've got universities saying that they want dancers to be literate and know about all areas of dance. But then when it's time to audition dancers, we only look at technical skills, but then we're upset. The dancers aren't literate. So I'm just kind of wondering about that circle of insanity, I guess, is what I'm curious about, that circle of insanity. Maybe if you're in higher ed out there and you have some thoughts about that, please comment. But what do we think about that circle of insanity? Is that the root then of the problem?
I want to just jump on this conversation topic for a second, and I'm going to ask a question regarding this, because so there's all kinds of pedagogical shifts in secondary, right? I mean, as I've been an English teacher for 13 years, so I see it in the way classroom project-based learning is coming about, and there's all this design thinking, and kids are engaged in a critical thinking process that's not so cut and dry traditional ed. And what the conflict that we have in the academic subjects as well as in dance is fighting we need to prepare them for traditional university setting. And so whereas public education is trying to evolve and innovate and do all these things, I don't know, I'm ignorant to what's happening at the university level, and if these trends are also taking place there, and by giving our students these real hands-on kind of authentic but non-traditional experiences, are we doing them a disservice by not preparing them for the traditional higher ed that still exists? So that's the first part that kind of piggybacks on Nicole's question, because I feel like I'm running up against that in my other content areas that I teach, where it's like I want to give those non-academic students who are traditionally labeled at risk a hands-on learning experience, but I'm also serving an honors college-bound population. And so with dance, it's like you want to engage students in this. We're our own discourse community, and we want to engage students and help them find their passion and discover their joy of dance. But are there careers out there for them unless they've been dancing at a studio 5 days a week, in addition to public education? So, anyways.
Yeah.
It's a great question, which I don't know.
Yeah, I can. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I've been at UC Berkeley for a year now, only a year, and just in that short time, I know the discussion has come up around like it really almost redefining what the program is supposed to be, because it's modern based. The jazz class sits inside of the PE department. The ballet class, remarkably, sits inside of the PE department. And so, and inside of that, we have three dance instructors of color, myself, or one other African-American woman, and an Asian woman. And then they're offering a roots modern class. So looking at modern dance from the lens of the African diaspora, and trying to, provide different access points for students who may not necessarily have a strong modern background, but have a different movement background, but then giving them access to that modern training through that avenue. But we're struggling with that, you know, like how are we going to provide access and be open to students who don't come from that training? But you know, making it available to them at that level, knowing that they're behind the 8 ball a little bit already. So that's where we are right now. So we're looking at that question when we start back, you know, in August. So
yeah. Amy, maybe you could talk a little bit about U of H, which has a very strong cultural curriculum, and maybe talk about how they're approaching that.
Okay, well, a couple things that I know we're not alone in this. I know a lot of universities are doing this, but we certainly do not have an audition for our BA in dance program. Any student can declare dance as their major. Now, of course, they have to successfully get through the program just like they would if they were majoring in something else. We also require students to take a lot of Asia Pacific dance classes. That's our particular focus. So alongside, you know, a lot of the students do take modern and ballet and jazz and hip hop, but they're also required. So I think that's a key thing. I think that a lot of the classes outside, as Nicole mentioned, the big 3 are often electives. So I think having institutions move towards making those things requirements is important. I think another thing that is really important to us is that in all of our concerts that we have, we make sure that you know, modern or ballet isn't the thing that's being presented with privilege, and then there's like one piece that's Bharatanatyam. We try to have there be sort of equal representation across as far as our guest artists and the types of pieces that are being presented in our concerts, because that not only places value in it with our dancers, but also the audience that's watching it is really helpful to do that. Yeah, so I think it's in curriculum design a bit of deciding, you know, what you're doing within the curriculum and then what you're presenting publicly. I do know that I would definitely say that there's a conflict between all the great work that secondary is doing and then the discriminatory practices that exist in higher ed. I guess my only sign of hope for that is I do see it sort of changing. And I think that change is happening at different paces. The other thing that, I'm kind of losing my train of thought here, sorry.
That's okay. It's late in the day.
Yeah, no. I had something else I was going to comment about what you were saying about at Berkeley that you guys were sorting through. But yeah, oh, I know, here it was. The other thing is that one of the ways I think we can free ourselves in the dance field is to let go a little bit of this idea that the degree has to equate to a job. Because you know, our dance program is housed within the College of Arts and Humanities, okay? So I've talked a lot to the professors of history, English, philosophy, American studies, all across. All that we're also with like linguistics and languages, and they do not sit around and have conversations about what job their students are gonna have afterwards. And I don't think that those students that are majoring in history or English are also, you know, there's not like a commitment to those students like, well, the second you're done with this history degree, you're going to have a job, right? It's more a commitment to, like you said, giving them these exploratory experiences that are developing all these skill sets that they can apply in a variety of fields in a variety of ways. But I think because our dance past has been so sort of like professional training, the conservatory idea, like going into a company, that we often feel like, oh, are we in this like ethical dilemma about we're letting people pursue this dance thing, but what are they going to do as a job? And I understand that the economics and financial stability is a real thing. But I think we can still assure financial stability by providing them with an education that equips them to manage their lives and promote themselves and, you know, articulate their creativity and the things they're doing and all of that. And maybe you guys disagree with that idea, but we're trying to celebrate like the successes that our students have when they leave the degree. Like if we have a student graduate with a dance degree and the next year they're working in marketing, we see that as a huge success. And we put it all on our website and on our Facebook page. And we don't see that as like, oh, that's a failure because they're no longer working in the dance field. We feel like, no way, like they're so successful there because of the experiences that they had in dance. So kind of thinking in that way.
Well, I think I had this interesting conversation a couple months ago with someone, and he was saying that if he wanted to be a police officer, he would go to college, he would major in criminal justice, he would be trained to have that information, and then he would leave and obviously pursue, you know, go to the police academy and all of that. He says, but in the performing arts, you're expected to have the skill set before you already get there. And so I said to him, I go, well, you know, I said in the dance community, people might say, well, how am I supposed to teach you to dance if you don't already have any training? And he's like, well, isn't that what college is for? And that kind of pushed me back on my heels a little bit. He says, because for most other majors, it's an interest and an aptitude. That's what it is. And so he was asking me, how then do you guys as dancers evaluate aptitude? Because are you missing out on some people who could be very, very good dancers, but they didn't have this prior training? And I said, absolutely. We've probably missed out on hundreds of thousands of dancers over the past 60 years, maybe, you know, just because we're always looking for the thing that happened before, which I think takes us back to what Allison was talking about earlier, the cost of dance. If I'm required to go into college already with $35,000, $40,000 worth of training, what am I in college for?
Right.
And I couldn't answer that question. So maybe that's something for us to talk about here in this chat today is then what's the point of college? Are we really refining people? If we're expecting them to have 13, 14 years of training before they get there, what are we doing?
Oh, that's a good question. And I just want to say from a personal experience, of course, things have changed. I went to a very large university in Los Angeles, akin to Berkeley. And in the days when I was there, it was modern dance only. I am a jazz musical theater. That's my wheelhouse. And so I thankfully was in LA. But my parents, you know, they helped pay for college, which I was lucky. They helped pay for some of college. So I had to pay for the rest of it. And any of my dance classes, which I took outside of school, because to feed my soul, I needed jazz. I needed that traditional jazz. And I wound up studying from, you know, all of these great people in LA back in the day, Claude Thompson, Jaime Rogers, Hama. I mean, like the list is endless back in the 80s. And so I was really fortunate, but it cost me. I had to pay for that. And it was very expensive. I was very lucky. They had some students on scholarship, but I couldn't devote that time because I was also trying to seek out an education, which was not in dance, unfortunately. And, you know, there was no degree in dance anyways. You know, there was no dance credential, I should say. So it almost, you know, I studied psychology, but it was unfortunate, you know, so I don't know how anybody does that now or that many people do it. I don't know what the universities are doing to open their arms, open their eyes, to open their minds to, you know, embracing more of the, you know, people who are looking for a broader spectrum of education for dance.
Yeah.
I'm
sorry. No, you go ahead.
I'll be quick. I was just thinking, I just want to compliment, I'm sorry, I'm being so rude. It's Amy, right?
Yeah.
Okay. I was like, your name's not popping up and I have to like access my memory. I just want to compliment you because I feel like you just, in what you stated, and Ricka, thank you for sharing that story. I mean, I think everything that's coming out of this conversation is so valid for people to hear. But sometimes, you know, working for the California Department of Education, there's this push to teach kids industry-specific skills. And so when you're looking at the arts, media, and entertainment industry sector, which is where dance lives, according to the Career Technical Education umbrella, you know, there just aren't a lot of jobs in the performing arts on stage. But we teach our students that that's not all there is. And so the performing arts program that we established about 5 years ago, it's a model program for CDE because we look at dance and just live theater as a vehicle for expression, for teaching kids community, for teaching them interpersonal interactions, for teaching them leadership, and all these transferable skills like communication and just understanding of others, right? You have this diverse community of people who come together with different interests, but we have this one common language, and that's our love of the arts. And so I feel like all of those transferable skills give dance students specifically one up on other people going on into those interviews and going, because the confidence. And so I don't know, I just think that that's a really commendable, coming from higher ed, that reassures me that what I'm doing is okay. I'm not just training you for a career in the arts, but I'm training you for a career that the arts will help support, if that makes sense. So anyways, thank you for that. I feel better about myself now.
That's why we're here, right?
And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. It also provides an outlet for people. So I have a lot of friends who were dancers. They've gone on to other careers, but they'll go back and take a dance class just for the joy of it. And yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. I think, and I don't know, if I will see in my lifetime a complete shift in how colleges vet dancers. But for me, as someone who's teaching in a population of mostly Latinx students, for me, that whole idea of you need training to be here, and then that just deflates the student. But I've had some amazing students that if just a little bit more time had been taken in that process, that kid was exactly what that school was looking for, but it's hard, and it's hard to step away from that, even when I first started teaching, because, I'm coming from this background of jazz, ballet, and modern. So what do I do when I get to the high school? I'm like, well, the kids need jazz, ballet, and modern. And even, and I shudder to say this publicly, but even telling kids, if you don't study these things, you're not going to make it in dance. And so I felt this pressure to deliver this. And now the place that I am at now is, no, I'm not delivering that. We'll find a school that's right for you. And so we've spent a great deal of time looking for appropriate schools for students, looking at schools like U of H or UCR, that their audition doesn't exist, or you exist in the program for a little bit and then you move on to auditioning. But, those types of models. But, I would just encourage colleges to step out on that limb. UCLA is another school that does that as well. Their audition is very different. They don't tell the dancers what genre they're going to be doing, and it can range from a variety of different things. And I was so pleased when I took my students down there to visit with them, and they were so excited about UCLA because it became accessible. But I'm wondering about the person who's watching this today and saying, so you mean to tell me that if we want more dancers of color, we need to just get rid of all of the technical skill in dance? Is that what we're saying? And I'm being devil's advocate, by the way. So is that what we do? We just don't worry about technique. You just let anybody in that wants to come in, and the integrity of your program goes down into the drain.
Well, maybe we should ask Misty Copeland that question. Okay. I mean, obviously that's not the case. We don't throw things out.
Right. I would, so just, I'll go backwards and I'll go forward. Berkeley, as well as Contra Costa, does not have an audition. They audition, you have to audition into the advanced level classes. So if you've been there for a while and you've gone through the other classes, then it is understood that you would have a skill set to get into the higher level classes. And students come in with a broad range of movement background. Some no movement, technical dance training at all, but who have a passion for some aspect of dance. And when they come into the beginning level classes, I find that that's where you get them. If you can connect with them there and they have that passion and want to, even if it's not a major, we have a lot of minors at who want to somehow use dance to complement their other studies in some way. So they're not looking for professional careers in dance, but somehow it's going to connect and make their other major make sense to them in their life, as you know. But I find that being open and allowing them to come in with that information that they hold in their bodies, whatever it is, and allowing that to come up and come out in the process of them learning whatever the class is, then that's where they buy in and they say, I want to do this as a major. And then I think it's on the faculty to then support them in that process, to not throw the baby out with the bathwater, whatever that term is, but then provide access. And Berkeley and Contra Costa does a good job of providing those additional outside instructors to support that, even if they don't have that on faculty. And I know as a person at Dimensions, a teacher at Dimensions, we're always looking for that spark, not the technique, but the spark, the potential and the aptitude for someone who is, if they have the fire in the belly, that's what we're looking for, you know, and then you can take that fire and help shape it, you know. We're never looking at how much training you've had before, because someone said the other day, your character must equal your talent. So if you're, you know, so yeah. So I don't think it's a either or. I think it can be both and. And
you know, just piggybacking on what you just said.
I would agree.
Ricka, go ahead, and then Amy after Ricka.
LaTanya, I seem to piggyback on a lot of what you said because it resonates so much with me. But this kind of goes back to, you know, giving confidence to our students, listening to their backstories, finding out where their backgrounds and where they come from. And, you know, I just believe as an educator myself, and, you know, that it is for educators, all educators, to raise our students up. The world will take care of the dancer or the actor or the chiropractor or whatever people are trying to become, aspiring to become. If it's not meant for them to have a professional career in whatever it is that they're aspiring to, they'll figure it out. It just happens that way. And so in the meantime, I feel like I don't need to tell a student, you're not good enough, you can't do this, you don't have that training, you're not going to make it, because they'll figure it out. In the meantime, just like you're saying, we don't know what's going to happen if somebody comes in and tries something in a beginning class and then suddenly discovers for the first time, you know what, I have more than I realized, and they can do more. And if we provide that you know, safe place in the classroom to make those discoveries, then that is the best service we could provide for our students.
Amy, go ahead.
Yes, seconding all those things that you're saying. I think that at UH, and maybe for me personally, I do think that always sort of keeping high expectations, not only to the discipline or the genre itself, but then with the student is important, because I certainly had experiences when I was teaching high school and interface sometimes with other high schools, and sometimes I would ask those other teachers, oh, it's interesting that you're not, teaching ballet here. And they would say things like, oh, well, these kids here could never do ballet. Or, you know what I mean? So they were priding themselves in a way of like, well, no, I'm adapting this program to the population that I have and feeling. But as we all know, that is, a discriminatory act in itself, because you're now already sort of preventing access and setting an expectation based on a person's economic background, all those things. So I think that if we have a student that comes in with no prior experience and they say that they want to focus on hula or ballet or modern or whatever it might be, then it's our responsibility to make sure that they understand the full extent of that genre, and that they understand it at the entry level and at the highest level, and that they understand the type of commitment to that form. And we do have times where we'll have students that, as much as we don't want to lose them, we will be honest with them about even what we're able to provide them. And sometimes based on their particular interests, we might say, okay, well, this is the level to which we can get you. But if you want to get it to the highest place, you are going to have to seek things outside of here. And we'll provide those to you, or you may even have to consider transferring at some point. So we never try to present ourselves as the end-all, be-all. We can take them to a certain point. And we really commit ourselves financially to making sure that we have kumuhulas and that we have senseis and all these different Asian forms, so that they can study under that master teacher and understand what it is at the highest level. And they may choose to pursue that or switch paths or whatnot, but it's like the access and expectation can both be there.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. As we're continuing to talk about this, I love that we're bringing up this concept of this potential for trainable growth. And how do you guys think that shifts from the yes or no? That's what we've all traditionally in dance dealt with. Yes, you've got it, or no, you don't. But how does that potential for trainable growth, what does it look like? Like, what does it look like in your space? I mean, I can come from my perspective. We're looking at things like recall. When the kids come to us, it's a 3-day workshop, not a 1-day audition. We do that on purpose because I'm not only interested in how you move your body, but I'm interested in your work ethic too. And the work ethic piece is huge, because the work ethic, I think, is going to determine whether or not, when you tell that student, hey, this is the level to which we can provide, these are options for you, that kid with a good work ethic is going to take advantage of those options. And I can't see that in a 1-day audition. So for us, we're looking at work ethic, we're looking at recall, we're looking at the ability to apply corrections, and not saying, when I say the ability to apply corrections, that they apply the correction and get it right, but I can see it being processed in their head. You've said turn out that leg a little bit more, and I am trying to access my turnout, that I understand the words, I guess the words that are coming out of your mouth. So what does potential for trainable growth look like to you guys as you try to be advocates for a diversifying dance?
So my dance program is really new, and I have pretty much exclusively beginners, aside from a few trained dancers. So I teach these intro classes. Can you guys see me? Something?
No, yes. You're good. You're good.
I have like very weird mixed level classes where I have mostly kids with no dance experience whatsoever, and then I'll have a few that have like dance 5 days a week, like maybe 3 or 4. And so I have this mixed level group, and I think the one piece that gets in the way of students is their own insecurities. I think that's the biggest obstacle that I see for students growing, is their fear of looking a certain way or looking bad, especially with beginners. And so talking about potential for trainable growth, I mean, really it's your ability to let go. And this is hard for us as adults. I'm not saying it's an easy thing, but to let go of your ego to a certain extent so that you can learn. And I see the kids that struggle the most are the ones that are the most afraid to act goofy during improv scores. The ones who they're too ashamed to look a certain way in front of their peers. Those are the ones that have the least potential for trainable growth. And when I see that melt away, it's like the most rewarding thing. And in my beginners, I mean, primarily, number one, as Nicole said, work ethic and the desire to grow and the desire to transform and the passion and joy of the art. Like, that's what I look for. And can they turn out or not, or like retain choreography? Well, after like 2 or 3 years in my program, I can say, well, okay, yes, that matters. If you want to grow and move forward in more advanced dance classes, you need to start thinking about these things. But that passion and drive and that like willingness to try anything, for me, that's number one.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else want to comment on what potential for trainable growth looks like for you?
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. At Dimensions, for our youth program, I am the director of somebody just went black. Did I go black? I don't know what's going on. Okay.
You do when you're talking.
Okay, all right. So I am the director of the students who serve as our community. They're like the arts ambassadors. They go out and they perform in the community. So there are more advanced students. I used to have an audition process. It became an invitation only deal after a while, because I look at students over a year. I watch them for over a year to see, and most of the students who come in are, brand new to a dance education in the class, in the studio. So I look at folk over a year, and it's about the fight. It's about, again, the belly, the fire in the belly. And I always say I can work with a good attitude and passion for what they're doing and a good work ethic. I can always work with that. And it's not about, it's not about the lines and the, things like that. It's about what do you bring into the table, and after a while, the lines come, the techniques fall into place, and then the performance aspect, the smiling. The hardest thing I find is like to get youth to smile, when they're performing, like pulling teeth, but that comes when they become more comfortable. So it's always just that how they bring themselves to the table. And for me and the rest of the faculty here at Dimensions, everything else falls into place, but we look for that fire in the belly first.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think for me, it's almost exactly what Allison was saying. Finding that one kid who's somewhere in the back of the room, and they discover for the first time that they have more ability than they realized they did, and they begin to take risks. And Allison, I just want to compliment you, because if you're having those successes in your room, that means you have made it a really safe place for kids to make mistakes. And we need more teachers like that. Mm-hmm. So that's really beautiful. And this is what the whole premise behind my organization, Dance and Dialogue, is all about, by the way. And it's about those kids who have fear, and then the other ones, everyone who drops judgment, so that everyone has a fair chance in the room to experience the pure joy of dance without feeling judged or judging themselves. And so, I think about one student in particular when I want to answer this question, who had so much fear, and but somehow found, you know, we did a tap, you know, one day of tap, and she found in that day that that was her thing. And otherwise, I mean, this is a girl who's been bullied, and she had a lot of, you know, issues going on personally. And this one thing changed her life. And her confidence went through the roof. The kids who were bullying her watched her tap dance. And we love that saying, success is the sweetest revenge. All she had to do was dance in front of them with this newfound passion and with this joy and the fire in her belly. And the kids now respect her because she feels good about herself. And so if that's as far as she goes, I think she's headed for musicals at this point. But I mean, that's just one story of many that will happen, as you know, and that is what I look for. I look for the one who is, whose mind and heart is open to pushing themselves and becoming willing to take a risk.
Can I ask a question for the panel? Sorry, I thought you were done, Ricka. I just have a question. Does anybody have a background or come from a background in like strict ballet training? Because I don't. And I wonder how this conversation would change. Like, I just am curious if, because what I'm hearing from all of us is it's a very different philosophy than what I've heard from my students that have been training exclusively in ballet. And I'm wondering if it's a very different dialogue, if we were all ballet background people. And I don't know where you guys all come from.
I had to study a lot of ballet, but I wasn't a ballerina. And, you know, I have to say on the other end of that, you know, the other thing I look for is I tell my students who, you know, you know, a lot of, especially the ones who are out there doing competition dance, and all their moves look very identical. They look similar, you know, and I say, okay, so you're standing in a room with 100 dancers who could do exactly what you can do. How are you going to stand out? And I'm like, the one who tells the story.
Yeah.
The one who tells the story.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if there's anybody out there that's watching that has a classical ballet background. Please feel free to chime in. Allison, I do agree with you. I think this is a very different conversation. If we're sitting on a panel of ballet teachers, you know, I don't know. I think it's a different conversation. Amy, were you going to say something?
Yeah, not about the ballet, but just about kind of back to what you're talking about, the trainable growth. Something that I have personally been trying to do, and maybe this seems a bit controversial, and we've been talking about this a lot in our program, is to let go entirely. I have a new class about trying to get all of the students to a particular way of being or a particular type of disposition towards the dance that we're studying or what we're doing, and trying to really and truly see value in the way that the students individually bring themselves to class and approach what we're doing. So for example, practice that at about 3 or 4 weeks in, sort of publicly in front of everyone in the class, pointing out the different things we've noticed from students and the value in that. Like complimenting the person that has chosen to stand in the back every class and complimenting them for their generosity, for their humility, for their attentiveness to wanting to observe before they go, like really seeing those things as a very important asset to our community, versus trying to get everybody to be really forthright and bold and move in this certain way, but to really say that that you can learn from that person that doesn't always stand in the front. You can learn from the person who does stand in the front. I mean, but that each person's experience with dance and how they enter it is necessary for all of us. And instead of just this commitment and desire to try to change them, but to really let them be, even when, and it is not easy, because sometimes for me, I will find myself inwardly getting irritated because I'll feel like, God, that student always seems like they're just standing there. And it's like, no, Amy, let that go. Like success isn't them approaching it the same way that I would, or this student over here that aligns with my disposition, but to say that I can see some value in that, and just let them be that, and not try to change it. And somehow in honoring exactly as they are, they will either stay or they naturally sort of change, or I don't know. So far, it seems to be changing me as a teacher and also changing the culture of my class. And it's no longer like creating a clear standard of privilege to my students, because otherwise they're all kind of trying to be this thing that they think I privilege the most.
Yeah.
Versus sort of saying, no, like I actually privilege this person over here who never goes first and stands in the back, because there's honor in that too, you know. Anyways, that's what I was saying.
Can I say something to that too?
Yeah.
That's really struck me, because I was going to say it's sort of the same thing. That's the way I teach kindergarten through 8th grade at a school. And then I also work with Joga Performance Group, one of the education coordinators. And so I go into a lot of different communities where, you know, I'm only there for like 3 weeks. I'm only there for 1 week, or only once a week for how long. And so my approach sort of with kids that I may see every week, or kids that I see like once a year, is sort of like starting with that you, like, who are you as a person? And kind of getting in touch with that. And what are your skills? What are your talents? What are your wishes? What are your goals? And just kind of really tapping into that and keeping that to the forefront as you go through these different sort of dance explorations, you know, whether it's improvisation or whether it's a warm up, or how do you bring yourself into every single thing that you're doing? And it's sort of like that fire in your belly, you know, like, and it doesn't matter where you're standing, and maybe you're not doing exactly the same thing, but I totally agree with you, Amy. I think when you allow anyone to be themselves, and what you have is all it takes right now. You don't have to have had dance for the last 5 years, 3 years, whatever. What you have right now, you're ready for this experience. It really brings this trust and value. It creates a really safe, sacred space. And I think people feel more comfortable to take risks and kind of go on that sort of journey with you. So I really like how our conversation has gone from like, you know, I feel like it started maybe with sort of younger sort of children, then it like jumped into this sort of secondary education. And I feel like it's kind of similar too. I feel like what people may be doing in secondary education, maybe people are doing also at the beginning of the dance, of the dance sort of life, I guess, or your dance life. And I was wondering, we haven't really talked about, I mean, I don't want to switch it but I feel like time is almost out.
No, we're okay. We're all right. We have a few more minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just wondering about the challenges. Like, I feel like we're talking about all these things that we do and what helps, but what is like one particular challenge maybe that, you know, that we can kind of start to plug our way at and sort of feel like, what are the solutions with that? What's like a certain challenge that you've had when you're in these situations? And I know we haven't said it, but we've said these communities, those communities disadvantaged, and we haven't really pinpointed it. I don't know what you would define it as. And I don't like to put labels on it per se, so that's why I kind of left that.
For me, it's an access issue. I work in a huge school district. Fontana Unified is a humongous school district, and there's only one high school with a comprehensive dance program. I've worked really hard to start to work on implementing dance K through 8. It's slow, it's hard work, but for me, in the community that I work in, so not necessarily these communities, in a community that is with high poverty, mostly Latino, the issue is understanding the importance of it, and then getting the district to provide the resources to support it. Now they understand it now. We are doing extremely well. We got the district to fund dance K through 8 using the LCAP, but that was a long and hard struggle because they didn't understand the value of dance. And the exact statement that was said to me, well, the kids can't read or write or do math, so we don't have time for dance. And so for me, just trying to explain to them or have them look at my program and go, look at all these kids, look at them invested in school. We need a hook for kids.
then we can work on reading, writing, and math and all of that. So for me, I think a huge problem is the access. Then once you get access, the next hurdle for me, I think, is the dance community itself. That will then begin to discount you because you haven't been dancing since you were 3, and will start to swallow up those opportunities. So I see it as twofold. It becomes access, then it becomes the dance community, our practices, some of the things that we do within the dance community that sometimes tell dancers of color, you can be in dance, but we need you to assimilate. And by what I mean by assimilate is assimilate in certain ways. You know, you need to fix your body. Your thighs are too big. Can you lose weight? We're all going to wear suntan tights, but you're chocolate, but just wear the suntan tights. And I know that some people think, well, that's not that big of a deal, but it begins to marginalize the dancer. So I see it as twofold. That's my take on it.
I want to compliment Nicole on what she's done. I had the opportunity of visiting her program recently in the last couple months and learning about the way that she has I'm sure she's had support, but pretty much single-handedly brought opportunity and exposure of dance to the elementary levels through her teaching students how to be teachers. And I hope to take what I learned from Nicole in her program and bring it to my school as we're working on or my district, I should say, as we're working on the development of a district arts plan. And what I've also learned a lot from the California Alliance for Arts Education, and they've created a whole campaign on how to use Title I funding to justify arts education, because arts are the #1 intervention. I mean, it's to us as artists, it's a no-brainer. But as Nicole said, there's this philosophical block in a lot of district offices with curriculum and instruction people in the public system anyways, where that's extra, that's enrichment. Kids who need support in academics, well, there's no time for dance. And that is a deep-rooted problem, philosophical problem, and it's not backed by research. I'm going to share this bit of research that I just found because it was pretty mind-blowing to me. And there is this, it was published by the NEA. I think it was 2016, so it's really current. But it was a study on arts education as a pathway to college. And I'm preaching to the choir out there, but the study demonstrated, and it was a longitudinal study, so it followed students for a very extensive period of time, I think through high school and the first couple years of college. And I'll just read this piece of evidence that it was published by Kenneth Elpis, who's a music educator and researcher. But dance students out of all the different arts disciplines were 70% more likely to pursue post-secondary study past high school for at least 2 years than non-dance students, regardless of socioeconomic status, sex, race, GPA, standardized test scores, or participation in interscholastic athletics. That's pretty mind-blowing. That's 70% more likely to pursue post-secondary education just from their experience and exposure in dance. And that's the stuff that justifies this pedagogical and philosophical shift that needs to happen to make dance more accessible at the public school level, starting with the littles that Patricia teaches. Just by exposing them, it's like Nicole has opened her theater up and brought in the elementary students to free showings of what her high school students are doing. And they're inspired by that, and they want to start dancing with her. So anyways, I want to compliment her, but I think it's people like us who are passionate enough to tell this story and to do something about it that is going to, and what Ricka's doing with her nonprofit and opening these doors with kids starting at a really young age, like what Joe Goodham is doing with their education program. And it's just essential to think about it as being exposure, #1, sparks interest, and opens doors. And once we have that, the rest will follow. So anyways, end rant.
Right.
So then I guess as we're talking about, so for me, challenges are access and then just the dance community practices. Do others of you see any other challenges in doing this kind of work? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. things that I think is the greatest challenge that we're facing within dance education is defining success for students. And I think that, and I mean like redefining what success means, like in the body, in performance, like programmatically within our programs, what success means like after they leave our programs. And I think trying to redefine that means letting go of a lot of ego, letting go of a lot of sort of past practices or existing practices. And I just see that as a huge challenge. And I think that we as a field naturally perpetuate all of our sort of cultures within dance and the way we privilege certain things and the way we deem what success is. And redefining that involves like changing our narratives with our students and where we place our resources, what we present publicly, all of that. It has to be a commitment to all of that. And, you know, I just think that that's not easy, right? I mean, I think we do all believe it in philosophy, but operationalizing it is very difficult because we often feel like, you know, our program and our students are a reflection of our own success, right? The definitions of success in which we sort of grew up in, we're sort of, you know, our thinking is a product of our own structures that we sort of functioned under. So kind of unraveling all of that and sort of, you know, moving away from all of this colonizing of the body and the ideas of success is, I mean, a huge challenge, but yeah. I think one that we all have to commit to.
I'd like to piggyback on that. For dimensions in our Rites of Passage program, and this now that I'm saying it out loud, it's something that I could, you know, easily incorporate into the Berkeley or, you know, at the other spaces I teach. But with the youth, at the beginning of the classes, the sessions, we set a class goal, you know, and then each student sets a goal for themselves. Okay, and so at the end of the session, which is 10 weeks, 14 weeks, 7 weeks, we revisit what those goals were, and then the students get to assess whether they felt that they succeeded their goals. And so they get to define what that success is for themselves. And then the class discusses, you know, whether they felt as a class they achieved the goals that they set, you know, as success for themselves, and giving them ownership and leadership in that, so that they own the process. They have ownership in the process of their education, you know. So that's one way that we try to, and we didn't think of it as redefining the success, but that's exactly what it is. It's like, whose narrative are we talking to, you know? Yeah. In that. So that's easily something that can be taken into the higher education.
I just wanted to add one more thing before I forget it, and then I'll be quiet. I also think that we probably all do this when we have an opportunity to bring a guest artist in or somebody to come and talk to our students. We often reach for that, you know, whatever is that quintessential, that singular definition of success, right? That big company person or that big choreographer or whatnot. But I think that it can be extremely powerful to look for your own alumni or your students that may not even be dancing anymore, to come in and for them to say, look, you know, I have a family now, I own a home, this is the job I have, and to publicly celebrate them in front of our students, to be like, we are so proud of you and we are so proud of all that you have done, and you are such an amazing person in our program. And like, so that the students, because as much as we want to also provide access to these like exceptional professional dancers in the field, it is still reiterating this idea that those are the people that really made it. And I want to let them know that you can all really make it, okay? And you can really make it by this multitude of paths. And so we have to like use those people as our guests and our examples as well, and not always just pull from, you know, that one area of an example.
Yeah,
anyways.
absolutely.
Thank you. No, thank you. Absolutely. So as we sit here and we talk about this, and in our last couple minutes together, I'm thinking about that viewer that's saying, yeah, that's great. Okay, so what do I do? Like what's next? Or, how do I start to shift my practice? And I'm thinking about that. And then I'm also thinking about the reality of this. And for me, um, working in working with populations who have limited resources, um, poverty situations, it's hard work. It's hard work, and you have to be a fighter and a bulldog. That is, I think, for me, that is something that I guess that I want to put out in the atmosphere. And not to say that it can't be done, but you need to understand you're going to encounter no's, no, 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 but you have to keep getting in there and explaining and talking to people, because a huge part of what happened in Fontana was about not just educating students, but educating the community. And when I say community, I'm talking about parents, talking about students, I'm talking about administrators, district personnel, getting them to understand that. So I guess what I want to say in my own kind of closing thoughts is, if you are in a community where there are challenges like that, you got to put on your helmet, you got to get out the hoe and the pick, and you have to be willing to get in there and do the work, because there's not an understanding. But I would not trade that for the world. I would not trade going into some place where everyone gets the arts. I feel like the work that I'm doing at Miller is so valuable, because it's like uncovering a fossil. Like, you're finding this amazing potential that nobody knew about. And for me, I don't know, I feel like that work is so much better than kind of remolding clay that's already been formed into something. But maybe for you guys, as we close up, what are kind of your final thoughts? Like, what do you want people to leave with today?
I forget what I was going to say. I think like the number one thing that is important for us as educators, just in general, is to remember that it's not about us, number one, and that we need to leave our egos at the door and understand that dance it's such a complicated art form, but it's also something that should be accessible to everyone, and it's our jobs to make it accessible to everyone. So what can we do within our own classrooms? I mean, we can fight the system, and we can be exhausted doing so. I mean, as educators, we're overworked, we're underappreciated, we're tired a lot of the time. We have to take care of ourselves, but we're obviously not in it for the money. So what are we in it for? We're in it for our community. And so how do we listen to that community? How do we listen to the kids in the room? How do we, as I finish where I started, understand that when they go home, they have their own unique set of challenges. As Amy mentioned, they're not standing there quiet in the back of the room because they're lazy. We don't know if they were up till 2 a.m. doing whatever, having to go to work after school. We just need to understand who we're serving. And I think by doing that and by inspiring students, we're doing our jobs to the best of our ability. And that's the piece of advice that I need to always remember going into my job, and that I would leave with others.
Thank you. Someone else?
You know, this is like a mantra from Dance and Dialogue, which is when I say to all the kids every year, we see you, we hear you, you matter. And I think everything else just falls into place. If you just remember that, everything else just works out. And, you know, as Allison said earlier, preaching to the choir here, you know, this is just an amazing group of panelists and, you know, facilitators this evening. And, you know, I really feel honored to be a part of this. And thank you so much for including me and invited me to be a part of this, because I learned so much from all of you. It's just been amazing. But I think that's what it is just making sure that we listen and see what happens.
Thank you. Got about 2 minutes left. So Amy or LaTanya, or both of you, or not.
Go ahead, Amy.
Okay, I was just gonna end by saying that I think that at least on my own personal journey, I'm just trying to stay really critically conscious all the time of the messages that I give to students, and to realize at all times everything that I am doing is messages to them about what I privilege or what I deem as successful and this and that. And I'm just trying really hard not to lose sight of that, and to realize that at every moment where I might be celebrating something, at the same exact time, it's then underrepresenting something else. So to not only stay critically conscious myself, but expose that publicly to my students, and then kind of invite them to do the same thing, so that we're all sort of saying, hey, what does this mean that we're doing this? And how does it serve some good and serve bad at the same time? And how do we grapple with that? And how do we feel about it? And how do we take ownership of that? So just kind of living in that space. But of course, it can be exhausting, but I think necessary.
Thank you.
Yeah.
LaTanya, anything?
I ditto everyone. I ditto everyone, and I just appreciate the knowledge shared here this evening, and like Amy said, I am constantly looking at how I present and represent myself with my students, and making sure that I hold myself accountable for what I'm sharing with them, and making sure that I'm being as broad and as inclusive as possible, so that they understand the full range of this thing we call dance, this life form that we call dance, and it's so that they can take that with them into their lives. And it's not about the end, it's a process. I don't ever see the end of it, so it's a constant process about how you can incorporate this learning and this experience.
Absolutely. For those of you that are watching today, we will post in the comments some links to all of our participants' in places where they work, just so that you can connect with them if you have more questions or more specific questions about something that you heard today. And Patricia, I think, is going to wrap us up.
Well, I was just want to say that I think something that no one has really said yet, which is, I mean, we should just do more of this. We should do more of this talking and sharing, supporting, right? I mean, that's how we kind of reach these different levels of awareness, I think, and really knowing what we can do and how we can help to sort of shape this world kind of a little bit more into what we really feel is important and meaningful for everyone. So I just want to say thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I hope to do it again. I hope, if you're not on the panel next time, I hope that you guys can tune in at least and listen.
Definitely.
Thank you so much, everybody. This was incredible. I'm just sweating bullets the entire time we were doing this. So thank you. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night, everybody.
Thank you.
All right.
Do the same.
Good night.
Bye.
Right.